Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and we're finishing up Mega May with Mega Man Battle Network. Now, this was a GBA game from 2001, and it is mostly known for sort of kind of competing with the Pokemon idea, but doing it in a different fashion. Because its battle system is so unique, I don't know if any other game has tried a game like this, or if it has, nothing has ever really come to the public consciousness to my end that I can think of. It's not even like Radiata stories. I've seen grid-based games before in an RPG setting, but not done in the way that this game does it. And it ended up spawning a few spin-offs, or a few sequels, because this was a spin-off to the Mega Man franchise, and good on it, because I think a lot of Mega Man, like, you get the Mega Mans and the X's and the Zeros, and they kind of just feel retelling the same style, and it's fine, but this is a wholly unique experience. Mega Man Legends that I talked about last week was a wholly different experience. And while not everything in this game worked to my satisfaction, I felt that the battle system alone is so good and so unique in its presentation that any foibles that exist kind of fall behind. And I still think that now that, like, the Mega Man Battle Network collection exists, there's a way to play these games now and re-experience what people in the GBA era were experiencing. So, as far as the way this game works, we're in a new 2000XX timeline. We always kind of start there, whether it's Mega Man or Mega Man X. I think X is in the same storyline, Zero's in the same storyline. This is in its own separate universe. But it's treading some ground that has been similar. The idea of future humanity, what do we do with it? But also in a kind of, like, 20 years on, looking back on it now, the idea that everything is tied to the internet or tied to an internet connection, that anything you can do has a Bluetooth or they call it jacking in, which will never not get funny, I suppose. But the idea that almost anything, an oven, a lamp, a classroom whiteboard, train stations, water stations, whatever, you can hack into. And you can use what are known as net navies. So avatars, basically. So social avatars, pretty much, that can fight or, just wander around or do things. Kind of like the way Wreck-It Ralph or Futurama did their versions of, how do you do the internet? Well, this is how you do it. The city itself, known as ACDC. Haha, funny. But the thing about it that struck me was how kiddie of a game this was, and I felt the same way with Legends. And I'm not saying I don't like kid friendly, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you do have to kind of accept it. It's kind of the same way you kind of have to accept a bit of, like, Kingdom Hearts is more like preteen teenager stuff, and you sometimes get a lot heavier subjects, but the writing is not gonna win any awards. Mega Man Battle Network and Mega Man Legends are kind of the same way. You kind of have to get into that Saturday morning cartoon mindset, and if that's not something you're into, this is not going to be the game for you. Or Powered Up is kind of the same way. Mega Man X, I think, gets away with it because it's a little heavier, it's a lot slicker presentation, so it doesn't feel like just a kid's game, but Legends and Network definitely do. So bear that in mind. It is trying to ape the Pokemon formula, but it is still trying to do its own thing. As far as where these net navies exist, they exist in the net. A series of people created this thing known as the Worldwide Network, and everybody can just kind of do and say things. It's almost like smart houses. Everything kind of exists, and you can tie everything into. There's a place known as Scilab where they research all this stuff, and they maintain the network. So where are the antagonists? They are known as WWW, or World 3. They are led by who else? Lord Wille, because of course, if it's not Sigma and X, it's Wille in the original, and it's Wille here. He doesn't show up until kind of midway, but you don't fight him until the end, because of course you don't. But he's, in an RPG sense, he's the main villain, and he's like the Dr. Claw, or Dr. Eggman sitting in a chair and just kind of chastising his flunkies to do whatever they do. So what they try to do is a bunch of weird shit. They try to go into people's homes as repairmen and hack a virus into their ovens and make their houses explode, or lock children into their classrooms and re-educate them, which was kind of strange, or shutting off the water supply, poisoning the water supply, or depriving them of oxygen. So it's still played for jokey comedy and very lightweight, but some of the stuff they do is pretty fucking intense. So despite the fact that the game is meant for kids, some of the stuff they do is still pretty freaking depraved. So what Lan has to do is use his NetNavi, megaman.exe, and go into the network and figure out ways to get through barriers and passcodes and stuff. So you get this kind of mechanic where Lan does stuff in the overworld, talking to his friends or his teachers or whatever, and Mega Man is doing all the battling stuff, but he's also he's inputting passcodes, or he's going through barriers, or he's switching over to Lan to do a thing. Lan has a such and such relationship with a character named Male, who may or may not be his friend, but he's too stupid to notice because he's a fucking protagonist, because of course he doesn't know, and we gotta remember they're 5th graders, so obviously they're not gonna be that freaking intense on it. But still, like, she's roll.exe. It's pretty obvious they're gonna end up together and they're friends, but he's too stupid to know any better. But whatever. They don't go so overboard on it, but they do, sort of. But she's still there just to kind of give you the access to roll as a character, as a damsel in distress, but also as roll in it as a card, a system of cards, and they're some of the best ones you can get. One of my main hang-ups with the game was these passcodes. Early on, you'd get into these things where you have to go through like 5 or 6 different passcodes, and some of them would be a hint. It says, go check how many books are in a certain library, how many whatever, but you over here. And then later on, there'd be no passcodes, and I think you'd either have to remember something finicky from earlier in the game, or you just have to guess. So you'd be standing there just guessing forever, over and over and over and over, and not doing whatever. So it's just silly little busy work that, isn't such a big deal. It doesn't affect the gameplay. It affects the flow a little bit. So, but there's environmental hazards like turning on water hoses to freeze or to unfreeze water in a certain area. You fight a lot of like the old school Mega Man bosses. One of the friends for Lan has Gutsman as his thing, and you can kind of battle him throughout the game. Another dude has Proto Man, so they're sort of rivals. It's sort of whatever, it's kind of here and there as rivalry, but not really a rivalry. It's just, I'm a moody fucker, I'm a moody son of a bitch, so I don't like you, that sort of dumb bullshit. But you got to get Proto Man in there somewhere, I suppose. But again, the idea is the World 3 are trying to take over the net with this virus, this life virus. So they're doing all these little things. And when you go through them, you get through those bosses and you get through these random encounters. The bosses themselves are unique. Excuse me, because you can either have an Iceman or an Elecman, which were characters from the original Mega Man or from other franchises later on, kind of as nice little surprises hidden there as their own bosses. Or you have enemies like Mets and other types of things that you've seen in Mega Man before as random encounters. You even have, I think one of my favorite bosses was Number Man, where he would put up these barriers and you have to kind of pick which one had the smallest barrier, because they would come and push you and try to damage you, and you had to shoot through it and then do damage with the buster. And you just have to do it. Then he would roll a die and do a different thing, and then we'd roll another thing. which goes into the battle system. So there's kind of cool ideas that play in the battle system sometimes. So we might as well spend the majority of the game on that, because that is really what this game is about. You have a 3x3 grid on one side and a 3x3 grid on another. And you have a chance to push your opponent into a 2x3, or be pushed into 2x3 yourself and have less room. There's also a chance that they can knock out some of the pillars. You have a chance that, because you only have so many spaces to work with. The general gist of it is everything is done via chips. Think of it as like cards from Chain of Memories. That would be the best way to describe it. So the Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories idea, or the way that I say some of the Paper Mario games have been doing it recently, where they give you these cards that you have certain attacks and you get better and better and better stuff as you go. So you'd have a deck of things that you would pick. And of those, and this is I think one of the more frustrating bits, is that they would randomly select 5. So you could use your buster for piddly little damage, 1 damage per shot. Or you could use cannons. You can use pickaxe damage. You can use explosion damage. Ice. Roll can come in and do damage and then heal you. All these different cards that you collect from different enemies and different bosses come into your deck. The trick is that you only have a certain amount of time. There's a charge meter on the top of the screen, and you kind of have to weigh how much time you're going to be weaving in and out to do damage while you're waiting for your stuff to charge, because you get your 5 things that you can kind of input, or you can wait, and then you can use 10, or you can use 15 if you wait another turn. So you have to kind of weigh your options as to what is the best strategy. And that's really the key to the system, is weaving in and out, dodging opponents' attacks, because they're going to be attacking you in real time mostly. You get a chance to stop time to choose your stuff. But then it's kind of like its own free-for-all, where the Met will kind of blow stuff up and it will be like a straight line attack, or another guy will bounce like water bubbles onto like one thing and it'll bounce to another thing, and you kind of have to dodge in and out, but you can also be dealing with like multiple enemies doing multiple things. Some of them can blow up some of the ground, so you have less ground to walk on. So it's a cool system at play, to where you can finagle with the enemies, but they can also mess with you in real time, and it's a very big strategy component and almost a puzzle mechanic of figuring out what chips and what time to use on what enemies, because if you try to do all bunch of damage but you waste your turn, or you can't do enough damage, say if they have a shield up and you have to do 100 damage on a turn, that's something later bosses would do. You'd have to weigh that stuff, because you only get like 1 or 2 shots with those attacks per turn. Then you're stuck with the buster doing piddly little shots. But you also have to keep in mind of what the enemies are doing, and even if it's, and I think the coolest thing is, even if it's like 1 or 2 Mets on screen that are doing the same thing, they're acting like right after each other, so they're constantly messing with you. So you have to filter in and out from space to space and grid to grid to figure out where Mega Man has to stand to avoid taking damage. Later on, you're going to have way more HP and you can deal with more, but the enemies are going to do more damage too. So it's a give and take, and a very big strategic component, and it's something I don't think I've ever seen any game attempt. If it has, maybe they've used this system before, or Mega Man copied the system and redid it in a different way, but this is an intense battle system that really holds the game up, and I'm sure later on they either do the same things, or they add more to it, or they streamline it, but even from the first game on, it looks really good. It's really fast-paced and hectic. And that's something that I'm not used to, especially for like a game with a lot of random encounters, because it's not like a full action game. It's a grid-based system, and it's not even turn-based, because those guys will be gunning for you really freaking quick. So it's an action-based system, but you're only allowed certain spaces and certain movements. You can, maybe teleport to a spot or two, or an enemy will teleport to a spot or two, but really that's about as much movement as you're going to get. So it's a lot of weighing the positives and negatives of what your deck has versus what the enemies are giving you. More on, you're going to have a certain enemy type that you're going to recognize, and then you're going to know how to beat them, but it's still really cool and really holds up this game because, as I stated, for all the weirdness that this game has, I think from the writing standpoint, there's not a lot there. The characters don't really give you much. I mean, even Dr. Wille, he'll have his speech at the end, but he doesn't come across as anybody who's trying to do anything super special. He's just, yeah, I'm going to destroy you, that sort of thing. And, his henchmen and henchwomen are just kind of there. Nobody's really trying to reinvent the wheel. And you just kind of have to get past it a little bit. The stuff in the game and the characters in the game are there to set up the battles, and that's really it. The other thing I think the game could do a little better is the look of the internet itself. I think they were going for kind of an isometric Breath of Fire 3, Breath of Fire 4 look, but they didn't really have a lot of intricacy with the environments. They didn't have a lot of intricacy with the backdrops. Like, one of the backdrops is just a pink-ass background with the word E flashing in gold and kind of spinning over and over. And some of them are just electric-looking things. Some are ice-looking things. Some are fire. They're just like little, like, stock... They look like screensavers. It's like something you'd have on a computer screensaver. It fits the mechanic of the game, but it's not really all that exciting to look at. So it's not the most exciting game to look at, and I'm wondering if they improve that. Because I only really saw a guy play Mega Man Battle Network 3 on Twitch before doing this, before reviewing it. So my knowledge of Network is, going to be more in tune to what am I seeing later on in the franchise. As a start, it kind of reminded me of how Earthbound did their look. Like, when you go into battle, Earthbound was going for that weird, psychedelic, weird background, like Toe Jam and Earl, where you'd flap the elevator and do all this pop art and stuff. It's not that exciting looking, So the game doesn't give you much in terms of the plot, doesn't give you much in terms of characters or story. It tries. The best I can say is it tries. It tries to give you something in this world that is a unique setup to get you into the gameplay. Once the gameplay has you, it'll certainly grab you. Will it be enough to grab you to the point that you want to keep going and get to the next story bit? I don't know. But there's enough cool stuff there that, I can understand why this franchise would be a big deal. Not just because it has the Mega Man name to it, but because they tried something different. So, call it a tentative recommendation, so to speak. I'm not very enthusiastic about a lot of the aspects, but there are some things that they could fix, or probably did fix, later on when they had a bigger budget or had more time to work on it, or, just tried something different, because it is a kind of a one-trick pony. But good for them is that one trick is the thing that people will play. And if the gameplay is good, then you can kind of excuse a lot of other things being sometimes. But that'll do it for Mega May for me. And I think this was a fun, cool idea. And next year I'm going to try and do more Mega Man stuff. I don't know if it's going to be the same series or not, but I'm going to try different things and bounce around until I get through all of those games. And, it's a cool idea. But as far as what's coming up in June and July, because we're nearing the 2-year anniversary of this Strife Sanctum podcast. Next up will be My Dress Up Darling. We'll get back into anime. Really good show. I think it loses a little bit of steam near the end, but that initial rush of seeing the main characters and their chemistry really holds up, so that's a good show. The finish to the post Legaia podcast with Lee and myself will be next, episode 98. Episode 99 will be Chobits, a show that I can just talk about from memory if I need to. But if I get a chance to rewatch it, I'm going to try and watch Fruits Basket. It was something that Lee and I talked about while we're doing the Resident Evil playthrough. I'm going to try and do that. But if I get time to re-watch Chobits, I've watched it like 5 or 10 times. I know my way around Chobits, but I enjoyed it. So it's going to be one of those walks down memory lanes kind of things. And then after that will be episode 100. Now that we're a month away, I'm going to give this up. It's been probably the easiest thing you could have figured out. But I've not mentioned what the game is until now, just because I didn't know if it would be an exciting reveal or not. However, I think it's only appropriate that while I'm going through the game myself, I might as well review Persona 4 Golden. So I don't think there's any chance I'm going to beat Persona 4 Golden on stream. So it is going to be a spoiler on YouTube schedule. So it is going to be a spoiler-filled review after the fact. So bear that in mind. But it was really this or Chrono Trigger. And I mean, it was kind of obvious given my background and given how I've kind of felt that Chrono Trigger was, I liked it, but not as much as you'd think I would, sort of thing. Replaying it and rewatching it and, diving back into it. Persona 4 is one of those things that everybody knows I'm a Persona guy. So it just made sense that if I'm going to celebrate 100th episode, it's either going to be Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger. I mean, I've already done Super Mario RPG. I've already done some of the Final Fantasy games. I've already done Persona 5. It seemed fitting that the next one would be Persona 4. And that seems like a great milestone episode to do. It's fitting because I'm doing that on my other channel already. So it made perfect sense. So Persona 4, even though I've not completed it on my channel, I've beaten it and rewatched it and watched other people play it for 15 years. I know my way around Persona 4, if anything else. And I am excited to talk about it. And hopefully you guys are excited too. But we'll see that when we get to it. But that will do it for Mega Man Battle Network this week. And I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.